Hey, okay. I got a busted right knee. I got to sit in a peculiar way. Containment, right? The principle today is containment. This is actually a term from international relations theory. And when we have an aggressive or hostile polity, there's a few different ways we can respond to them. One of them is through containment theory, which means that we essentially restrict their movements and their motions. See Mauricio, he's like, it's taking too long.
Should I
We restrict or we limit their movements within a particular area of operations for purposes of keeping them centralized. And then because we keep them centralized and they don't transgress the boundaries that we establish, and there's a lot of ways to do this. We can do it under threat of military action. We can do it through economic warfare like sanctions or tariffs. We can do it through informational warfare. But essentially, Iran is a good example in the modern world. We operate in a way where their operations are limited. And if you think that this doesn't relate to jiu-jitsu, once again, you're wrong. I absolutely despise, actually, people who take only a meathead approach to jiu-jitsu and think that jiu-jitsu is only about jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is so much more than just getting on the mat and rolling. It, in many ways, epitomizes the struggle that we face in daily lives. I can't possibly count, if I had thousands of hands, the number of people whose lives have been positively impacted, if not completely and utterly transformed by the practice of jiu-jitsu. It's a highly personal experience. At the end of it all, jiu-jitsu is actually very much about relationship, and that means you develop relationships with your training partners, with your coach, with your team, with your school, with the community writ large, which can be local and global. And it also means that you're specializing in understanding how to manage the conflict in a relationship that is exemplified in this contest that we call rolling or training together. So when you're trying to manage conflict, the containment theory is very useful, and the principal form of containment theory that happens in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is called the guard, especially the closed guard. Guards encircle and thereby contain, and they are able to, at will, insert or restrict the flow of tension that they put into the containment itself. So we'll look today at the closed guard as the epitome of how to action containment theory on the mat and get you thinking about jiu-jitsu, which is at least as, if not infinitely more important than actually doing jiu-jitsu itself. So here we go. Charlene is inside my closed guard. And that means that I've found myself on my back and both legs reach out and hug her around her hips.
It's a leg hug.
It's very friendly. It's a leg hug. And when I leg hug Charlene, I can leave my knees open, which is a way of allowing my legs to relax enough that my hips have mobility, where they can swing back and forth, and they can lift and drop and lift and drop. Or I can close my knees a bit. I can pinch my knees. I can clamshell. And this gives me a little more control over the opponent so that I can pull them close, I can push them away, and I might be able to, with the appropriate hip movement, tilt them left or tilt them right, okay? So this is the containment theory operating within the closed guard system. And of course, the person on top is not passive. The person on top may not necessarily be... Okay, go ahead. Pause. We have to let in a Zoom.
Who dat?
A Zoom tutero.
Oh, it went away.
Interesting.
Oh, well.
Okay, maybe they'll be back. All right, so having contained this person in my closed guard, the individual may not be actively resistant and immediately trying to attack the closed guard, but they will certainly be trying to preserve their placement in the closed guard to the benefit of their defense. And what that means is that they'll usually spread their knees so they can establish a base. They'll tend to sit back a bit on their heels
and they'll tend to lengthen their spine and keep their head high. These two elements of base and posture are what prohibit the closed guard from now being as successful
Rob.
against a person
Rob.
who has a broken
Will you
base
come let Nathan in?
or a broken posture.
Will you come let Nathan in?
Okay, so within this based and postured position, because the person is resisting my attempts to
On the Zoom.
pull or push or tilt, the only thing I have left is containment, right? So the point is, if you're playing closed guard, we're not advocating that you hold on for dear life. We are advocating that you try to keep the guard closed, because when the guard is closed, you are containing. Now, the guard is exclusively a leg wrestling position, and if you're not actually wrestling with your legs, you're ignoring the lower 50% of your body, and you're missing out on a lot of opportunity that jiu-jitsu may offer to you. So that's an important part of your praxis. What we see in the beginning is most people put their legs around the person in the closed guard, and then they try to use their upper body strength to
It's not under their
activate the guard, which means they may grab a collar and pull as hard as they can, or they may grab a sleeve and pull as hard as they can, but they're ignoring the capability of the legs to actually assist in the upper body engagement. So, of course, that only gets worse when the person on top understands how to spread their base and elevate their posture with a straight spine and a high head. And that's where the magic of the guard comes in, because if, for example, we reach out and take the collar in front of us, right, in a cross grip, and then we hold the sleeve, it's fairly easy for the person to keep the collar from being penetrated too deeply simply by sitting high. Or sometimes they can do what Charlene is doing, where she has a second hand and she'll just strip the grip, right, pretty easily. Sometimes the person can hold their own collar and rip it out of my grip, right? Yep. Or if I hold their hand or their wrist, they can just strip the grip similarly. So what we'd like to do is at least set up a position where the likelihood of being able to attach to a collar and stay connected is higher. And in the beginning, that's going to be a same side grip, and we don't want to do it under the arm, right? Because under the arm gives them the power to swim back inside, or it gives them the power to swim over the top and put pressure, or it gives them the power to block the entry of the choke. So we'd like to go over the arm and then put a little weight on the arm by not pulling, but by taking the elbow and rotating it down inside the open space here, right? If I have outside control, that means I'm operating outside the person's arms. I need to at least take a portion of that outside control and rotating the elbow in, end up in between their arms, okay? So I'm just gonna do this and keep a little pressure both on the collar, which helps to start bending the head, and also on the arm. Now the second hand can actually back that grip up by cross gripping on the sleeve. All right, now we have a little tension here. Now, the person usually starts to attempt to extricate themselves, and they're very interested in elevating the height of their base. So typically what we see is that despite being in this position, the person may make a base on me, sometimes on the mat, though that's not very intelligent, and then they're gonna step up on one foot. Okay, now here's the thing. When they step up on one foot, that's fine, right? I can still easily keep the guard closed. If, however, I let them stand up completely,
I can't.
okay, go ahead. I open, right? I let them stand up completely. Now my guard starts to have issues, because look how high my hips are elevated off the ground. They've placed their knees behind my hips. They've taken my base away, and all they have to do is step back on one side, and already they've split the guard because it becomes so difficult to hang on. So with that being the case, the trick is, if you're playing a closed guard, keep the person on their knees, because inevitably, when the person stands, the chances of passing become massively statistically enhanced. So we'll have Charlene go back down to her knees, and the closed guard position is being activated as a purpose of containment. We'll take a grip on the same side collar for purposes of staying over this arm, and then we just put the elbow down on the arm, but we also rotate the elbow in, because we want to gain inside control, not operate exclusively outside the arms. So we rotate in, and I'll take a cross grip on the opposite sleeve just to back up that connection, okay? At least here what I've done is I've overloaded one side and therefore disadvantaged her such that she can only operate defensively with her upper body on this side alone, because that's the side that's uncontained. So typically what will happen is the person will put pressure on my hips with that free hand, and then they'll stand up on at least one foot. Okay, now this is the beginning of something that is potentially dangerous, because if they get to both feet, I'm in more trouble, right? Now I'm in more trouble. The guard is harder to hold on to. Their hips are still higher than mine. They've got gravity on their side, and if they just step back on one side, I'm open. So here's what we do. From the knees, right, one foot may be fine, but the second foot we can't allow. How do we stop that? We can't wait until the person is standing and then resort to this foolish upper body attack. We just mentioned at the beginning of this class that the guard is a leg wrestling position. Most people in the beginning will hold on to the guard and then attempt to valiantly, although wrongly, foolishly, fight using the power of their upper body, while at the same time just doing everything they can to hold on and burn out the energy in their legs, right? That's the consequence of holding on without having a plan for holding on. The purpose of the guard is not to hold on, the purpose of the guard is to contain. So once we've achieved containment with our little leg hug, and we set up our grips, one foot is fine, but now look what happens, right? As she goes for the second foot, that's when I pull her in. That's it. It's not a lot of effort for me. I'm simply taking my knees and keeping my feet closed behind her back. I'm just pulling my knees to my chest. That's all. When you do this with your feet crossed behind her lower back, it controls her hips, right? The higher I climb, the more actively engaged I become in seeking out a submission on her neck, on her shoulder, on her elbows, perhaps on her wrists. But here, because I'm in the containment phase, we haven't advanced to the attack phase yet. Because I'm in the containment phase, my primary objective is keep Charlene from standing up. So if she gets to 1 foot, that's fine. But if she stands all the way up and I wait for her to get fully planted, now I'm in trouble and I have to turn to something else, right? So let's go back down to one knee. So when do you activate your leg wrestling to keep the person from standing fully up? Not when both feet are already planted, but as she steps up on the second foot before that foot hits the ground. Right there. All right, now you say, but how do I know this? Because I can't really see her foot given the position I'm in. Well, you just have to feel. Part of the issue that people run into in jiu-jitsu is they think very much about their own base, and then they don't consider the other person's base. So for example, my own base in the guard is based on my relationship with the mat. What's on the mat? My hips are on the mat, maybe one hand might be on the mat, my shoulders are on the mat. And I have a pretty solid relationship because a lot of my upper body, at least the back of it, is on the mat. So there's a good base in the guard. But Charlene's base is on her knees, and then it's going to transition to her feet. I need to pay attention to her base and how her base moves and how her base expands and how her base shrinks, just as much as I need to pay attention to my own base. So it's critical that to keep her from standing, I disrupt her base. The containment that we're discussing is the only possible way that I'll be able to activate the disruption of that base successfully. Because at least in the containment, it allows me to remain in touch. And when I'm in touch, I can feel her responses. So this will be a timing issue for you. You'll have to do this with a partner numerous times to actually see what it feels like to have them stand fully, to have them be on 1 foot, and then to understand where the transitory in-between is that would cause you to disrupt their attempt to go from 1 foot to 2 and then keep them close, right? So that's the first phase of containment. Now, an additional phase of containment would see the person successfully standing in full. So the guard's been closed. I'm attempting to use my grip strategy here just to help feel her out. And she gets to 1 foot, but before she goes to the 2nd foot, without even standing all the way, now she'll change her angle here. So usually what'll happen is the person would go to both feet and then they would step back on one side, and their plane of fighting would go from straight to offset, similar to what we would call a fighting stance, where you're standing with your left leg forward and your right leg back. Your feet are offset from one another. You can usually draw a 45-degree line between the feet, and that's what we call a fighting stance. Here, if the person's on 1 foot, but they keep their knee that's on the ground in the same line as this foot, then they're a lot more tippable, you see? So even at this point, they'll have to adjust by making a little angle. So she'll slide her knee back a little bit so she's at 45 degrees. Now already, because she's keeping pressure in my hip line, I can start to feel the pressure of her base on my feet, and it's starting to separate them and pull them apart. So the question is, what can I do now to keep her contained? Well, one thing I can do is I can follow her knee. I can follow her knee. She went that way, which means that we're no longer straight facing one another. So I can also go that way, and now we're straight facing one another. And what I've done is I've just lifted my hips up, and I've moved them over to her knee and then put them back down. And I did this while keeping the grips, right? Now, if she stops me from doing that by keeping pressure on my hips, see, now I can't move. She won't let me elevate. I may be forced to open the guard, right? And if I open the guard and don't do something responsively, not only have I lost the containment, but I've invited her to the pass. So as soon as I open the guard, I have to change my position to keep the containment, or to at least get it back. One way to get it back is to reverse the position entirely so that I don't have to worry about keeping her contained from the bottom, but I can contain her from the top. One example here would be what's called the elevator sweep. I put all of my weight on the back of the leg that is resting on Charlene's planted foot. You see how there's a nice right angle there. She's made a nice base for me. And I put all of my weight on this leg. And remember in the beginning of the class, we talked about how even within the closed guard, I can swing my hips back and forth. Well, now that the guard is open, but I'm still at least containing her with these guardrails, all the weight on the back of the leg means I could swing out. And then I can pull my foot to my heel and rotate my foot underneath until it finds her knee. Huh?
I got short legs.
I also have a bad knee, so that was really painful. The top of my foot, here's her knee. The top of my foot is nestled in the crook of her knee. Right, I'm still on the same grips here. The second leg is now a tripwire, so that falls outside her base. And we'll do a little offsetting of base here. I'll pull her close to me to get her weight forward. And then I'll chop with the bottom leg while I lift with the top. And we'll end up on top, right off camera, as usual, right off camera. So let's move over a little bit. So if there's one thing we've gotten really good at during these online classes, it's in constantly going off camera. So the containment happens. She steps up on the foot, and then she changes her angle by sliding her back knee into a 45-degree space. So now she's essentially in the equivalent of a fighting stance, but she's on 1 foot and 1 knee, right? I can either follow her by lifting the hips and ending up on top of the knee, or if I stay straight and want to look for a reversal and regain the containment, I'll open my guard temporarily, hang all of my weight on the back of my leg that's resting on her posted foot. And when I do this, my hips will float and I can swing them out the back. Right, I can swing them out the back. Now, Charlene has shorter legs and I've got a knee injury, so this is actually a little bit difficult to do right now. But to make this insertion work, I would pull my heel to my butt and then rotate the foot underneath, right? Yes, thank you. Don't do this. A lot of people do this. They take the foot out and then try to fit it underneath by force. And of course, all that does is expose you to a pass, right? You see what happens? Yeah. So When you take your hips out, the purpose of taking the hips out is to make space for the foot to circle underneath. So I pull the heel of the butt and I circle the foot underneath. And then I feel the top of the foot nestled behind the knee joint. It's a nice little tight fit. I keep my grips as they are, and the second leg becomes a tripwire. Now I pull a little bit of her weight onto me and then lift the hook and chop with the bottom leg until I roll to the top. Now I'm containing her from the top position by pinching my knees along her rib cage or hip line, just as I was from the bottom position with the guard. It's a different kind of hug. Okay, so that's an option for intentionally abandoning an entanglement, a containment for a moment, just for the sake of reversing the position and establishing a top dominant containment. All right, another option here is that sometimes I'm in the closed guard and the person steps up on that foot and then they start to place their hand in the space that they've created between my leg and their body. You see, and sometimes that little pressure, that wedge, watch her make the wedge, that will open the guard. You see, that will open the guard. Particularly when they have taken the pain to offset their stance by taking the opposite knee away at a 45-degree angle, thus simulating that standing fighting stance. So she steps up on one foot, she slides the rear knee back a little bit to create the angle of attack, and then she starts to insert her hand, and when she pushes her hips forward, that opens the guard. Now the goal here for her is to advance that hand that's gone into my base, across my body to my opposite shoulder, and she does that by walking the foot forward. See what she did? She walked the foot forward. If she would do this with her arm alone, right, with the power of her arm alone, this jeopardizes her and it puts her in a different kind of entanglement, a different kind of containment. Initially, I was containing both of her hips, and now what I can do, because the arm exposes another option for containment, is I can put a little pressure here to make an adjustment, and then I can contain her shoulders, right? I'm making a seatbelt grip from the front, over one shoulder and behind the other. This is the closed guard. This is the same thing as playing closed guard around the hips. I'm just playing closed guard around or over one shoulder and under another. But either way, if you look, my feet are closed, they are crossed, that's a closed guard position, right? To mitigate this, she won't use the arm. She'll use the arm as a placeholder, and then she'll take a step forward toward the head. Now it's an issue. You see, now the guard has been opened. I don't have a closed guard. I've lost my containment. And in order to get it back, I have to take some steps where I reverse engineer her advancement. So the first thing to do is stop her wrist from advancing, right? I can take the wrist and pull it off my gi, or sometimes if she hasn't gotten there yet, I can make a cup, a C grip, and just push the wrist away. Okay? Now as she advances here, I will shoulder walk my hips out from underneath her to make the position long. And then just to keep her from advancing even more, that free foot can go to the hip, and I can take my second foot and just put it back in between the arms, and then hold the sleeves and pull her close and recontain. All right? Very simple. Let's back up. I think we got a little too close. So I have my initial containment. I'm using a closed guard. And this time when she steps up on the foot, she does everything right, and she wedges my feet open with the hands. Now look, if she uses or insists on power, it's easy for me to just transfer the containment from around the hips. Look, I just lift the hips, and now I contain her around the shoulders. My feet are crossed behind her back, I'm over one shoulder and under the other. The last thing I want you to do is think of this as, you're about to do the triangle. No, I'm not. I'm just containing her. Do you understand? I'm just containing her. This rush to submission, this submission-centric philosophy is the death of contemporary jiu-jitsu, especially at the beginning phases. If you rush to submit, you miss all of the real substance of jiu-jitsu because all you care about is finishing. This is not a video game. We're not looking for the fatality in Mortal Kombat. We're looking to actually play a long game for the sake of playing, and then to get the result that naturally occurs as a result of the relationship being fulfilled by the exchange. Right now, the game is containment. Other things may happen that lead me into what we call the final submission. In this example, the natural one would be a triangle choke. But there's others, right? There's arm locks here. There are bent arm locks here. So don't think about submissions. Think about containment. Now, if she does the right thing, before I get over her shoulder, she puts the knee and elbow together here and she takes a big step, you see? She used her base before I could use mine. She beat me to that punch. I have to strip this grip from my midsection and then convert it into a cup, right? A C grip. We call it the cup because that's how you drink, right? Make a C grip on the wrist, push that away, keep her from advancing while I shoulder walk back. And I could use this foot in her hip to keep her from walking forward even more. And then as she tries to struggle here and fight, I can simply take the foot and put it back underneath the arm. I grab the sleeves that are in front of me. I'm going to get a little relief here by opening my feet and then pulling her sleeves to my chin. And then, boom, contained again. Contained again.
Nathan, did you get that? That's how you stop that smash pass.
That's phase one, right, of stopping a smash pass, right? Phase two. What? What did he say?
I smash pass him with this all the time.
Oh. Phase two of stopping. So that's another good point, actually. The example we happen to be using is the classic Elio Gracie closed guard opening to top control pass, right? But this containment theory will work anywhere. For example, I may have already established this over-under grip with my legs from the front, and then when I start to lose that, because the person puts the pressure in the hips and sits up tall, right? Should I fight here to be as containing as possible, using only the power of my legs? Or should I make some adjustments like I did when she moved her knee in order to retain the containment, which might require me temporarily abandoning the containment? So one example that might lead to a submission, which I know makes everybody happy, because you don't understand jiu-jitsu, but you will, is to forget about this attack or this containment as being solely fixed on what leads to a triangle choke, and to intentionally open it, right? And now I'm looking to attack this arm, which means that I take my foot outside and stretch away, 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 away. And now what have I done? I've gone from closed guard around the hips to closed guard around the shoulders. Now we're just going to go closed guard around one arm. That's all. You see, I'm crossing my feet, but I'm putting them a little deeper into this figure four lock so that I contain the shoulder alone, and then I'm pinching my knees. But this is still a closed guard. Do you understand? I'm containing the arm because I couldn't contain the hips. I couldn't contain the shoulders, so now I'm back to one. Now, the degree to which she actively resists this by sitting up, right, may lead me to going back to the shoulder containment. And the degree to which she freaks out and tries to open the shoulder containment by pushing away may just lead me to being able to replace the original closed guard. But the goal is not to go from here to a submission. The goal is to keep the opponent contained. And those are three basic examples of a progression from a person operating within a closed guard who might be seeking to escape or pass, right? The first level allows me to temporarily abandon the containment for purposes of reestablishing the full closed guard. The second one allows me to transition into a containment or a closed guard around the shoulder carriage. And the third allows me to transition to a containment of a singular arm. In either event, I can go forward or back. What I don't want to do is lose the containment. Because when I lose the containment and she gains control, which is going to be easier for her because she's already on top, now it doesn't really matter because she is going to end up passing and containing me, right? So don't forget that part of my advancement in containment is to prevent her from containing me, right? I'm doing the containing, not you. Okay.
All right. We're technically over time on the Zoom call anyway, but if there's anything that people would like to discuss on Facebook, you can ask questions in the comments. Thank you guys all very much for tuning in. We'll say that, as always, there's way more here than we discussed because of the time constraint. Suffice it to say that everything that we looked at from the knees can certainly happen from the feet. One example would be the person getting to a standing position with my guard still closed, and while they are fighting with my legs, using their arms, I transition into what most people would call an omoplata containment or an omoplata attempt, but it would be the same position on her singular arm that I used while she was still on her knees, but I'm doing that while she's standing, right? Another option would be what is called the waiter sweep. You can look that up. That means that my legs stay closed around her waist despite the fact that she's standing, and I underhook one leg and twist my hips toward that leg to off-balance her so she falls over the heavily weighted side. Another option would be a double ankle sweep, where I intentionally keep my guard closed, and then I walk my hips underneath the individual, cap the back of both of their heels at the Achilles, open my feet or abandon my containment just enough to get my knees into their chest, or sometimes if they're a little farther away, my feet into their hips. And then while I hold their ankles, I extend my legs so that they trip over my hands, right? All of these, though, lead to options where I advance my position for the sole purpose of regaining containment. The submission may or may not happen. It doesn't matter. That's not the goal. The goal is to play the jiu-jitsu, retain the containment, and then operating in that containment, once the person is fully disadvantaged, we can think about where to go next. Okay, anything you want to say?
No?
Man, that was easy. Okay, bye everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye, y'all.